celebrating and showcasing extraordinary people who are doing incredible things to make our world a better place. This is Close-Up Television. I'm your host, Jim Masters, and thanks for joining us. On today's episode, we celebrate executive coach Janine Bridgeford. Janine is the founder of the Bridgeford Group, LLC, where she helps overwhelmed individuals and leaders who feel they don't belong get comfortable and confident in their skin so they can enjoy the life, career, and status that they want. Janine serves as a coach and expert as well in the leadership and coach practice at BTS USA Incorporated, a global strategy consulting firm helping clients with the people side of strategy execution. She also has many years of experience in leading change in IT, engineering, and quality functions, where she served at the senior director level and executive levels, building global, high-performing teams in some of the top Fortune 100 companies. Janine has successfully led change and transformation in businesses in healthcare, consulting, insurance sectors, driving alignment of people and processes with a client-centered strategy enabled by new and integrated systems. Her approach focuses on the whole person, bringing about clarity on purpose and supporting individuals through the change they want to make to live true to their essence. Janine is a perceptive, big-picture thinking coach with over 25 years' experience in organizational change management, transformation, team building, and results-oriented coaching in fast-paced global environments. She has a passion for individuals' growth and helping them identify, develop, and bring forth their unique contribution to the world. Now, to find out how Lisa helps her clients develop the skills and vision to do that, she joins me in the Close-Up Television studios today for this exclusive interview. Janine, thanks for joining us here at Close-Up Television. It's a pleasure to see you. We've done the radio shows together, and now you're here in our studio. How was your trip from Milwaukee?
Uneventful, reflective, very pleasant.
You like to take the time to reflect and just think about things that you're working on and projects when you have quiet time on a plane?
Yeah, I mean, normally I sit on the aisle.
Yeah.
Because that's what I prefer, so I can get up when I want. This time I didn't get to choose, so I sat next to the window. And it was a different kind of a reflection. I brought a book with me just to, it's like, okay, let's see where it takes me. And it was very beautiful in a different way.
You do this wonderful coaching that we've talked about on the radio show, and I'm fascinated as to what inspired you initially in your own life's journey to realize that you were meant to do this work. Not only that you just wanted to do it, but you had to do this work. What was it about coaching and working with others and inspiring others that really spoke to you, Janine?
It was coaching by itself. I wasn't really so sure that that was exactly what I wanted to do. Anything that gets very much defined by a white or anything, I have a little bit of a
Which
rejection
is a lot of
kind
things
of a
in
thing
life,
to
right?
it.
Labels
exactly.
And defined, categorized.
I was like, I don't know if this is for me exactly. What, though, then increasingly kept supporting the evidence almost, like, why not?
Right.
Why shouldn't I do this? Was I really wanted to help people get through some of the things where I could see in team members that I would manage or that were in my charge, so to speak, the potential for something that would really help them achieve their goal, their dream, what they wanted to. And there was something holding them back. I couldn't get to it sometimes. And when I heard there is this thing called coaching at the mindset level and targeted, I was like, okay, I want in on this. Now I'm committed. But it's really been a build-up, I would say, over life. I think one defining moment that came to mind was when my parents were in a part of their marriage that was really tough. My mom had been taking care of her father for like 15 years or so, and then her mom. And she was so committed and loyal and dedicated to the care that she completely forgot herself in the process. And my dad saw that and was suffering for her because he's like, I don't know what else to do.
Happens a lot with caretakers, yeah.
It does. And they asked me at the time, I don't remember how old I was maybe in my 20s, if I could help them. And I was like, me help you? Like, what do you mean? And like, no, you're really good with that. So at first I was blown away, but it was the first time, and no less my parents, who really knew me, who trusted me with their relationship, and that felt like a really big deal. That felt like a really big deal at the time.
So that was sort of the impetus, that was the inspiration for you in the very beginning, huh?
Yes, it was one of those moments, I would say. It was one of those moments. And then later it really was more professionally related, until I became a mom. And the kid grew up.
That's
and then
a
I was like,
whole other...
Now how do I mother, you know? It came from these different angles again and again and again. And once I learned it, I realized, there is a whole other level of skill honing that I had never really realized when I was leading people, that could help me help them in ways that I never even imagined before. And that was exciting.
That's an aha moment,
yes.
right? That's a moment
yes.
where you're like, I think I have found my calling. I think I have found why I'm here. It's part of my purpose. And what was that feeling like when you discovered that? That must have been extraordinary.
Yes, and also like, well, but it's so easy. Like, all my life I was used to working hard and working hard. And suddenly I'm like, what do you mean coaching I should do? Like, I'm doing that. I was like,
you do it all day long.
That's like normal. That's like, I don't even have to try this. Well, and now I know the difference between great coaching and just natural coaching. Right. And
what are some of the differences?
For me personally, the differences were in not listening with an agenda. Okay, so as a leader,
right,
and a mother,
yes,
or a sister, right, or a friend, I always keep an agenda of what I think that would be really helpful for them. And as a professional coach, you really learn to let go of that and to just hold the space for the other person. It's no longer about me. That was hard.
Right.
Because I know what would really benefit you, Jim. Really know.
Right, exactly, right, right.
It's like, no. So what is it for you? What do you want out of this? And where do you want to go? And then they say something and you go like, and not to show that, but to just get really curious. That took a whole new relearning for me.
That's fascinating, huh? When you think about it, because you were coming at it from a different approach, and then as you learned a little bit more about it and applied sort of the essence of who you are to it, then it really rises to the surface in a beautiful way, huh?
Yeah, that's really well said too.
So as you're going along, one of the things that you do that I think is really extra special is there's so many self-limiting beliefs that we have. There's so much negative talk that we have. Some of it is just self-created because we have our ambitions and our expectations and our demands of ourselves, whether that's always striving for excellence, always trying to be perfect, or always trying to please everybody, that we put aside the authenticity of who we are because we're always trying to serve the rest of the world. And then you look in the mirror as years go on, and you're like, well, who is that person? I've always, that you may say when you're looking in your mirror, well, you've always been defined by everybody else and everything else, but not yourself. So there's a lot of people in all kinds of levels of business and in life who have these thoughts of overwhelm, of anxiety, of fear, of not even good enough. And that really gets in the way. And you work specifically with a lot of people who need work in that area, because when they reach truth, when they reach authenticity, and they reach the comfort level that it takes to say, okay, I can be authentic, I could live my truth, and the world didn't go away, it didn't dissolve. That's actually, the earth is still spinning, and actually people are actually attracted to you more because they see the essence of who you are. But all of these self-limiting beliefs and negative talk and other outside external forces that you've paid attention to have caused you to pull away from that. Tell us about working in that area and helping people get to that point of truth and authenticity, not just in the workplace, but in their lives.
Yeah. Something that a friend just shared this last week comes to mind first, which I thought captured it so beautifully and also in a very down-to-earth, real way. So she shared about one of the people that she was coaching, a young woman who was told at some point in, I don't know if it was a meeting or a conversation, "Well, you're really full of yourself, aren't you?" And she walked away from that conversation and started thinking about it, and then shared with my friend as her coach and said, I thought about this and I was like, yeah, thank you, because who else would I be full of? And I thought it was such a nice way of capturing and reframing something that for many could be like an affront.
Right.
It's like, you're full of yourself. Like, who do you think you
like
are?
they're attacking you or criticizing.
And for her, just like, think about that for a moment. I'm full of myself. Yeah, that's a compliment. Thank you. I'm all of me right now, right? And I'm nobody else. And that's exactly who I'm meant to be. So for many people that I work with, they think they are there, right? So they think that they are. They just feel like there's something that gets in the way from not having to work 10 to 12-hour days anymore. Or just something they just want a little tool to help them increase the performance of their teams. Something's just feels too hard and it's complicated. And my mantra, maybe from experience and also really a lot from what I learned from my parents, is like, it has to be simple.
Right.
It has to be simple. If it's complicated, you're rushing, it's too much going on,
right,
and your orientation is to the outside.
Right.
So when you really want to get to know yourself, you got to go inside.
And that's not always easy or comes naturally for a lot of people, right?
No.
They have been avoiding looking within. They'd rather put the emphasis on what's going on outside around them, right?
Sometimes, and again, so it's like these layers and layers of judgmental and fear-based emotions and thoughts that go, right? It might even start like, I'm going to look inside. What am I going to find there? I'd rather not. Let me just go, especially if we're extroverted, which in America, we tend to value extroversion more than introversion. That can be a really huge distraction from being authentic.
Yes.
Especially, so you have these leaders, they grow all the way to the top, sometimes faking extroversion and making them really feel uncomfortable,
right,
because that's what they've learned gets you further, right? Assert yourself, be a speaker, share your emotions, be vulnerable, all of that stuff. Well, yes, but when are you going to take care of yourself, and who are you? Well, people don't want to see who I am. They want to see who they want to see.
Yeah, right.
So it's a real layering back the onion, I find.
And what is that process like when you're dealing with somebody who, maybe is at a high level within a company or has a, very important role in life, and a lot of people depend on that person, and they have this image of who that person is, and they almost sometimes don't even let that person alter anything. Like, you just have to stay as that, and that's all we're going to accept you as, is that image, that person, that way of thinking. But yet the person is burning and yearning inside with other things that they want to share and emote, which could make the experience even richer and deeper and more productive. Because we are in a society where people label, people box in, people say, you got to look like that, you got to be that, you got to do that. And a lot of times the people that are saying it don't know what they're talking about, and they don't look in the mirror themselves, but they're quick to offer opinion. That person that they're saying it to may be thinking about things that they want to do, but they've never had an opportunity to really express it. And now here they are in a major role through either osmosis or through earning it and going up the ladder, or they were just thrust into that role as a leader quickly. and now they have to adapt, and now they have to relate to all of these other personalities, and they have to express themselves in ways that are real, and that can be difficult for some who are not naturally like that. And I'm sure you deal with a lot that are like that.
Yeah.
How do you? What is the process like when you see that? You make an assessment, you say, okay, I can see the dynamics here, I can see the personalities at play, and you can almost in an intuitive way see the ones that are playing the role and then the ones that are authentically living the role.
Yeah. Usually it does start with an assessment. The assessment doesn't have to be a formal one. I use a few, and most coaches, there's a whole host of assessments. My favorite assessment when it's a formal one, it is, and by that I mean not just my own intuition and getting to know the person a bit, getting a sense for who they are, is the Saboteur Assessment that I use from the positive intelligence approach. And the reason being that it goes right away into what are the 9 shades of negative thought patterns that a person has developed over their lifetime. And the power I find in there is, so when they get the report, there is almost always a massive resonance with something of it. It's like, wow. In a way of, that's what that is. I had no idea. And they realize how this has gotten in the way of things that they really deeply wanted all their life. Sometimes that is to be themselves, to be the best version of themselves, and they don't know how to get over it. And people keep telling them like, but you're constantly over things, or you're like so arrogant, or you're like this. They know they are not deep inside. But how to not come across that way, they have no idea how to get there.
That, right.
Right. So, and at the same time, to then be able to help them see that this is coming from their core strength is almost like now you're tapping into that power that they have and say, okay, and it's beautiful, and look at you. And what this means is that thing that you think is getting in your way is only getting in your way if you think of a toolbox that you have with a screwdriver and a hammer and a whole bunch of different things in it. But your favorite is the hammer.
Yeah.
And you really like the hammer, so you're going to use the hammer for everything.
For everything.
And then go like, well, the hammer made a hole in the wall. I didn't mean to make a hole in the wall, but the hammer is my favorite tool. You completely forgot you had other tools you could use. Maybe screwdriver would have been better, or maybe the drill would have been more appropriate first. So it really gets to right away to the core of giving them an idea and putting them in touch with some of the strength which will resonate. Because their belief in that moment is like, but wait a second. This really rational thinking that I'm doing, that in the report comes back as a hyper-rational, that's getting me the PhD that I have.
Right.
Okay, I'm really good analytically, so what, are you going to take that away from me too? And now I'm nobody anymore. And that's when the fear comes in and the judge right away.
Right,
it's like,
right.
oh, no. What happens is if you were to actually use that rational thinking ability when it's appropriate and then only, and what if you were to be able to also connect with your spouse? Not trying through your brain,
Right.
but actually really bringing in the heart. And now everything starts shifting. What would that look like?
How much of this also is emotional intelligence?
A lot of it.
Yeah. Tell us
lot of
about
it.
that and how that comes into play.
So there's 2 things. One, when we say emotional intelligence, it means our ability to pick up emotions in others, right? And to accurately read what those are. So for people who are naturally connecting, it's easy because they have a higher level of that already.
Right.
For people who are not, to be able to say, I have a very specific process for you that will still get you there, is liberating in a way. It's like, okay, so if you just make sure you notice the other person And what's interesting is, often people judge, in corporations in particular, engineers, for example, as the people who have a really hard time with emotions.
Right.
They're very good with creativity even, certainly with rational thinking oftentimes. I mean, they're innovators, all of that. Well, when you ask an engineer to just notice, like, what are you noticing? Just notice me. Like, what are you noticing? And they're like, I don't know. I'm not noticing anything.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. You do. But your brain is telling you what you're noticing is nothing of that, consequence, or it's nothing that's important enough to be articulating it.
Well, see, that's the thing, too, that I was just thinking about that leads to this thought, bridges it. We'll talk about bridges in a minute. It's very important. Our society also doesn't necessarily, it's starting to maybe now a little bit more as people learn and they appreciate and they understand it. But it seems like the society has gone away from celebrating emotion. And emotion, they poo-pooed it. Like, oh, you're showing emotion. Well, there's no time for emotion. And emotion is childish and it's passé and it's weak. When actually, I've always said, people who show emotion, people who are heart-centric, people who are the kind, good ones, are oftentimes stronger than the ones who aren't, because they're carrying the weight of the world on them. They're carrying generally their issues and problems and things they have to deal with, and usually other people's on them as well. And so, there's always this thought process of kindness is weakness, and if you're pleasant, it's there's no time for that, and showing emotion and feeling, trying to feel what other people are feeling and relating to them. But I think that's starting to shift a little bit with the understanding of emotional intelligence. So like what you say, the engineer that, may be home at dinner with the wife at the table and she's expressing herself or whatever it may be, and there's not getting it or feeling what she's saying. There's a disconnect there. Some of that could be also training and upbringing too, right?
Of course.
Coming from an environment where emotions weren't discussed. Feelings weren't discussed. We don't go there. We don't. It could be cultural. It could be whatever it is. We just don't do that. That's not healthy, right? To hold that all in and not identify with that?
Not really in the long term, it isn't. There's something interesting happening especially when we experience negative things in life, where we're feeling. Everybody does.
Yeah.
Everybody does. But when we have strengths that are more left brain centered, we tend to want to think our way out of the feeling. We're rationalizing in a way. It's not that important. Everybody says, mind over heart, whatever, all of those. And there is the balance. So we have both. And we can always argue what, the chicken and egg between the heart and the brain, which one is more important for life.
Right.
They're both.
You need both.
And your emotions are in the heart, and the brain is the one that does the rational thinking. But if you ignore the heart, the brain can't make up for it. So you have to first go and actually acknowledge how you're feeling, even to yourself. If you don't want to go to other people, that's okay too. But to acknowledge to yourself, I'm feeling really angry right now, if that's the case.
Right.
And then, now that's out, I can bring in the rational thinker and what we sometimes refer to as the realist or as the sage, different ways, right? To say, what's actually true about this moment? If somebody cut me off on the road, I'm pissed off. Yesterday, I haven't felt that way in a very long time on the road, but here around, I was like, oh my God, there's people going like, I really had to be alert in a way that I didn't have to be for a while on the road in particular. And I noticed like, oh, there's this thing kind of coming, like, there it is. Like, what's it telling me? It's like, no, I just go into the middle of the road. I leave space for going on both sides.
There's a routine to it.
It's like there's a routine to it. There's a flow
So
to
were
it.
you rationalizing and keeping the emotions in check.
After
In
I
that case,
acknowledged the
right,
emotion, yes,
right.
because I was like, wow.
Because you could have
this
let
is
the
really-
emotion rise,
Yeah.
and that's how a lot of people act out or respond.
Road
Because the
rage.
emotion takes
Yes.
over, and the rationalization is then,
Yeah.
it's the reverse of what we're talking
Right.
about. So you have to sort of like,
You got to notice it.
and quickly.
That's the key, yes. And the quickest way we notice it is through our emotions. We don't notice it because we're thinking something.
No.
I mean, the thoughts are all there. That idiot, that stupid.
Yeah. How dare
you
they?
know?
They invaded my space, and right.
Right. Is to say, wait, I'm feeling really suddenly, and I'm ready to just
Respond, react.
pedal to the metal, like, you know?
Not
Like,
Janine.
no. There's some things you can learn. Or she'd be surprised, I guess. But and then to really just say, okay, wait a second. No, this is it. It's like, now I'm going to say, no, what's going on?
Yeah.
They might be in a rush. They might just having a good
It might
time.
not be you, because some people will
It's
take that
never me.
as just they
Yeah.
did that to me.
That's right.
And then they react that way, and it might be because they're rushing to the hospital
Yes.
or something is going on that we're not aware of.
Right.
Yeah. But so that's rationalizing that and deducing that is important too, right?
It
I
is.
mean, a lot of people don't. We're in a very reactionary
Yes.
culture and time.
Yes.
More than ever, I think now at the time of the taping of this, we're in a very reactionary time where people are reacting to every little thing you say and do and think, and your facial expressions, and we're just reacting and assuming and on the offense.
Mm-hmm.
And that brings in a whole other thing into rationalization and emotional intelligence, trying to balance it all, huh?
Right. Well, when we're reacting, we're basically not in control. We're driven by our emotions in that moment, as opposed to we are in charge of our emotions.
Right.
The reason, so it's interesting, Judaism tells us that the brain is for a reason above the heart. Because at the end of the day, we are in charge of how we react. We are in charge of our behavior. If we, and you know, what's in the heart is like you have passion, you have love, you have all these things, but if that's not getting balanced by some like context of legality, let's say, and respect towards others' right to have equal safety as we all do, then it can get out of hand very quickly, as we see in the news every day.
Yeah.
And so the two of them play an important role. The heart needs to be noticed, but then it's like now you can choose your response, and that's where the responsibility comes in for all of us.
Right.
How do we, what do we choose? That's up to us. That's where free will comes in.
Exactly right.
It doesn't happen natural, just like that.
And let's talk about how your work at the Bridgeford Group applies to this. So when you're dealing with organizations and companies, employees, are you usually working specifically with the leader, with the management, with the CEOs, or do they also bring you in to work with all levels of staffing because there's different dynamics at play?
Yeah. More often than not, I work with people in the mid-level
The mid-level
management,
people.
not, and actually frontline.
And do they feel, are they the ones who feel less appreciated, or they don't know, they're not confident in their place and space, and they're trying to get ahead, but yet they've got there's a game to be played, and there's all this stuff you've got to do because you're not at the top there. So there's a lot of pressures that you're getting from people who are subordinate as well as people who are above, and you're trying to,
That's right.
you know, speak to all of it while also doing you.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And I like how you just put it, also doing you.
Right.
It's like there's a
Try to-
lot of tasks.
Yeah. Is there any time left in the day to do you? Right,
Right,
exactly.
right.
Tell us about that.
Well, when someone gets promoted to any people leader position, it's usually because they did really well on their own. They're very good at what they've been doing. And now they're entrusted with other people to teach them the same, or so they think. That's what often happens. So we're told, we're now trusting you with 5, 7, 14, 20 people. And because you're so good at what these, teach them to do the same thing. The problem is, if I teach you to coach like I do, you're never going to get as good at it as I am.
Right.
You can try as much as you, because it's my way of doing it. Your way of coaching would be very different, and your way of coaching, and equally as powerful in that different way. But so if I am a new people leader and I'm going to think like, this is kind of good, it means I'm kind of going up the ladder, which I want, there is more pay, there is the ambition for that is all there. But now what? I've already been working 50, 60 hour weeks, and now I gotta I have all these people, and some of them don't get it, and I'm supposed to teaching them. I know I can see that they don't get it, and now what am I doing?
Yeah.
Judging.
Yeah.
Right? I'm minimalizing them. Just, I don't even have to say anything, and some people will tell me, it's like, nobody will ever know. Especially in sales, right? They I can fake it all the way, you will never be able to tell. I'm like, you're wrong. Because people have sensors. We all have sensors.
Yes.
We know what's real and what's not. And as soon as it's not, we're like,
You're questioning it.
I'm not going to trust you.
Feeling in the stomach, right? Yeah. Physical feelings you get.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, suspicion. It's fake. What else are they not telling me, right? And now I'm supposed to be learning from you. You're going to teach me. You haven't even bothered asking me what I want to do yet. So how much am I going to give you if I'm your team member?
Because the trust is one of the most important things in life with anything, is this trust between each other. Because then, when the chips are down, you can trust that, each other will sort of support each other to bring things back. And you can emote in ways where you feel protected, and it's in confidence. And if there's no trust, that can really be, you'll always have that reserve, you'll hold back a little bit, which is, if you're dealing in a company atmosphere, that can be detrimental to the company as a whole if people are holding back because they don't trust the leader or the coworker. And I'm sure you've been in situations where you've seen that. You can sort of come in and say, okay, that's the one that's embellishing a little bit. There's the embellisher, the one that's, and there's the one who isn't getting the recognition, but it's a very hard, diligent worker and comes in and works very hard but doesn't get recognized. There's the one who is maybe a really good roll-up-the-sleeves leader and empathetic and try to get that camaraderie going. You can probably size up all the different dynamics in going in and dealing with them, pretty quickly.
Yes, and it's the biggest risk to actually then doing a good job, right? Because I have judgment too.
You can upset the cart, like they're sort of stuck in their way.
Curious. I gotta stay really curious in those moments.
Can't
it's
dive
easy.
in yet.
Yes, it's easy to just kind of pick up a few symptoms and then based on that roll. And as you probably know, that can lead you down some really bad bunny holes, right?
You're right.
Based on the assumptions you're making, because it's like you have something, and now the assumption is that person is always like that, and it's that person's fault that the other person feel like that. Well, and it never is that simple at that level, because it's about relationships. And then everybody has, so if we're all operating from this saboteur-driven brain of ours, it's an ugly picture. But when we can start seeing past that, and that's what I usually try and at least get like, okay, some people's like, why is it that we can't, why is it that it's not working? It's like, I'm trying so hard and I really want this. Like, well, where are you right now? Notice your state. Well, I'm really stressed out, right? So by definition, when you're stressed out, guess what? You're sending an invisible invitation to everybody else around you to also go into the state of protection. Right? It's like, woof, she's stressed out. I better go down low profile right now. I'm not going to want to lean in here. Back off.
Yeah.
Go safe. Or lay low. Well, if on the other hand, we're going to come in and I'm saying something along the lines like, wow, that's a really nice jacket, Jim, and you look like you're calm and present today. Good day for you so far. You're much more likely to start talking to me, to start opening his life. Oh, yeah, totally there.
Showing interest in them and putting them at ease, and that's important, right?
That's the key.
Right.
Because it's like this basic human need to be seen. We all have it.
Seen and heard, yeah.
And we can't.
Yeah. Right.
We in corporations and in leadership, we talk about listening skills all the time. Seeing skills, not so much. So people often go like, what exactly do you mean? And then we go back to, well, it means when they're saying something, I really listen. Now that's the listening part.
Yeah.
What's the seeing part? It's to notice, and it's to let them know what you're noticing. And sometimes it could be, I'm noticing sadness, or I'm noticing you're upset, or I'm noticing something they haven't even noticed or acknowledged themselves yet. And that's a very powerful trust moment.
Yes. So much of this is involved in neuroscience and psychology and all these different elements. Tell us a little about how all of that comes into play.
I'm not sure I'd be able to do that justice to the degree that academics would, for sure, because I'm neither a psychologist nor a psychiatrist. I would say each one of those sciences, though, added another lens and another approach, maybe an access point to different situations we come across. For some, it's through the emotions, and so the emotional intelligence part and the importance that plays in relationships that became accessible through that work. The more like psychological from a negative thought patterns aspect of it, that became accessible, I mean, a while ago for sure, but it's also been, for me, with the positive intelligence approach, which really brought it together and made it so simple in a way, was like, okay, because now I don't have to explain somebody, you know, you've got this, you've got that, and all that's going on. I could just say, hold on, let's take a few deep breaths.
Right.
I want you to feel your, the balls of your feet on the floor.
Right.
I want you to really connect. And that, I know now what I'm doing is I'm helping them engage more their regions of the brain where they are at their best when they're coming in stressed. And then I ask them again the same question that before they had a really hard time answering.
Right.
And suddenly it's crystal clear. It's like, you can do this anytime you feel stressed out. So what is something that you're doing on a day? And they might say like, well, I do a lot of work in my shop. Okay, great. So you work with wood, surfaces, feel it, how smooth it is. Really like the ridges on your fingers, like
tactile,
that. Yeah, it engages that brain, and you're strengthening this part of your brain that isn't worried about protecting you. It's open, it's creative, it has access to empathy. It can innovate. It can prioritize effectively, which most leaders I'm getting in contact with these days are completely overwhelmed. It's like everything is equally important. No, it really isn't. But let's work our way there. And when they can get in touch with that, then that becomes possible, and it's not complicated.
It's really fascinating. And one thing that hit me was this positive intelligence approach. Mm-hmm. Let's break that out and define that a little bit more, because I think that's unique.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, what it does is fundamentally it empowers the person to take control back of how they show up in the moments when they feel they are normally losing it.
Yeah.
Right? So young mothers with young kids who love a nice, neat, organized home. Yeah, well, a toddler's not going to help with that. And now they're losing it, but they are caring moms. They want to be there for their kids. And I'm like, how do I not lose it? Like, how do I overcome that? And to say, okay, this is what positive intelligence helps you with. It helps you first recognize that your desire for a neat, nice home is actually one of your core strengths and qualities, to organize and to make sense of things and to provide a safe environment for others. And the empathy you have, When you're losing it, it's like it becomes something that you feel you're losing control and it puts you in danger. That's often a pattern from the past, right? So the positive intelligence approach teaches them within 6 to 8 weeks a method, very simply, to say, I'm noticing, I'm feeling that way, I'm going to stop what I'm doing right now. I'm going to do what we call PQ reps, positive intelligence reps. So that's those tactile exercises, and choose any one that you like. Some people like the rubbing the fingers, others like a breath. I like the touch on the table because I work at the table a lot and nobody can see when I'm doing this.
Just below the lens level.
Below the lens level, right. And now I can look at the mess and say, okay, so what really is important right now? And I right away know it's my kid needs to explore and they need to develop motor skills and to have some fun, and they need to be safe. So I'm starting to develop a rule that says, okay, for you to be safe, you need to stay away from the stove, and there is no two ways about that. Or you need to stay away from certain things that would have them not be safe. There have to be some guidelines always, but now they're able to access that easily in the moment. That's a game changer.
That really is. Something else you use in your approach that I think is rather unique is conversations at play. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. It started out by me feeling and saying, like, I can't write. English not my mother tongue. I'm no good at this. I'm not good at grammar in German. You want me to do it in English? I have no clue, right? And really being called out by a keynote speaker, I felt called out. She didn't call me out, she called everybody out, really, to say everybody should write. Because we all kind of like the uniqueness that we all have. When we write, there's something that comes into play that's much deeper than just the words that we say. We have to put it down. There's something really special going on. And it's different than when I type. And so one day I was really frustrated. I had to finish a proposal. I do not like proposals and making proposals. I had to finish a proposal. And I realized I just had to calm down first. I just had to do something. At that time, I didn't know positive intelligence yet. But I started writing, what if? It was really just sort of these thoughts that came to me, and I just kind of wrote them out as they came. What if it was not about that?
Yeah.
What if, and I was like, wow. And once I read it, I felt like it nurtured me more than actually
exactly.
did it for anybody else.
Right, here you're working on for them, and you're getting something out of it.
Yes.
Which is beautiful with this work too, right?
Yes.
Because it can be as therapeutic for you as it is for what you're providing for others.
100%. Almost would say conversations at play first was therapeutic for me, or more like a step to clarity or processing. Oftentimes it was things when, race, the whole racial tension and race, and everybody were talking about it all the time. And just even that was annoying, right? Yes, I want to pay respect to every person, and especially to those who are underprivileged, and especially to those who are normally being judged as in a less good light than others are. The conversation about race per se, it's a hard one all around. So for me then to sit there and, I don't live with a lot of family. Half the time every week I spent with my son. The other half I'm by myself. And so I was like, okay, so it's a way for me to process some of these feelings. And often what has been interesting then, the things that come out are like, nice, there's light again. And it's not as heavy and as bad and as serious as I made it at first. It lets me breathing in.
Right.
And then it started resonating with other people too, and went from there.
Because a lot of this, you're expressing yourself beyond language, right? You're tapping into or trying to tap into the soul of the person through all of this work.
Yes. So through the work, I do. And it's, I don't know that it's that conscious, other than my mom always used to say, and she really played it forward. She always used to say, when you see somebody else do something bad, you have to find your piece of that, and then you have to ask for forgiveness, like to God. Well, so then I was like, well, okay, but this was in the context where terrorist attacks.
Sure.
Okay?
Yeah.
And it was like, and she's like, and she wouldn't even wait until you asked the question. And she's like, even with the terrorists.
She jumped right in.
Right. And I was like, how do you do that? Like, how can you actually find that within you to say, I have a piece of that person in me too? It takes a lot of courage in the moment to face that and acknowledge and says, yes, I do, versus to just say, I judge it. And I just watched a documentary called, I think it was White Right by Dia Khan. And it was fascinating to see the Sikh priest in Milwaukee in 2017, the shooting that happened there.
Yeah.
Who actually said the very same thing in a way. It's like when we stop seeing our part in the other person that did the violence, then I forget exactly the word he said, but it was something along the lines of, we are no longer able to help them. We can't access them. So there's something that unites us, and I do believe we know that that's the soul. In a way, we're all part of one. We just have all different pieces of the same one.
Right, exactly.
You know?
How do you deal with people who are resistant to some of this, who are just so set in their ways, whether it's through upbringing or experiences or all of the above, they're like, oh, come on, I don't have time to do all of this, and it's just not my personality. I'm just a very blunt, stoic person. I'm dry. I don't have time to tap into this, that, and the other thing. And I'm sure you come across people who are just, they've got the Bluetooth here and one here and 14 cell phones, and they're making deals, and here we go, and blah, blah, blah. And that's what they do, and they're good at doing that. But as far as trying to tap into the soul and all of they're resistant, and they're like, ugh, how do you work with that? How do you approach? Because what you do is not cookie cutter. You customize it based on scenarios, personalities, people, hopes, dreams, fears, all of it.
Yeah.
So how do you work with somebody who is resistant, or you just can tell there's a wall that either they've built or has been built for them through life?
Yeah. The first thing I do is I try to make them feel seen. In that very much. You're very busy. I see like you must be very good at what you're doing. Right. You're super busy. Like, are you sure this is a good time for us to still talk?
Right.
I never mention soul work.
Right.
I never do.
Right.
I mean, we now talk about this. We're getting underneath the hood. So
digging in, right?
Right, exactly. When I work with people, I don't. What I ask them is like, what do you want? Especially when there is resistance.
Right.
What do you really want? And then they say something like, well, I don't really know. Like, what do I want? Well, that's a really tough question.
Right. I've never thought about it, or nobody ever took the time to ask me what I want.
Yeah. And then as they're talking, I'm thinking about what makes them tell me what they're telling me now. What is it that motivates them to say this? Because they could choose from their whole life anything. Why this thing? And I try to listen for that why and then play it back. So what I'm hearing you say is, you really are tired of working 12-hour days. Right. You love the success you have. You know you're very good at what you're doing, but you're really tired of that. Yeah. You bet. Right.
They say that right away, quick. Yeah. Okay, you tapped into something here.
Yes.
Give you another 5 minutes. You're right.
Right. And then it really gets into a little bit more of that. So this whole making them feel seen and heard is like a cycle throughout the whole conversation at every step. Because sometimes it's like, It's like, what's in that I never really thought about this, and you're making me think of this, and now you're going into another plane. So oftentimes it's a way of kind of getting to where they want to go.
Right.
Always go where they want to go. But also hearing the things they don't say that where they want to go, but they're still there. That's the soul talking or whispering maybe. And to see if they're open to it. And sometimes they're not open to it yet. And it's okay. It's like
Takes
if there's
time.
something there and they're like, yeah, no. But then sometimes it's just like, if you only could give me like, I just need like a tool. I'm having a really tough conversation coming up.
Right.
So how can I
So
make this
need
like go
something
better?
that I can
Okay.
grab onto.
Right. It's like, okay, so with the tactile, and here is what you do when you do that. Oh, that's super helpful. Great, I can do that. Thank you. That's helpful. And then the second one might be a little structure for a hard conversation. Make sure that the other person feels seen too. If they're stressed out and you notice they're stressed out and you notice they're afraid and they're scared, say that.
Right.
You look really scared. I want to put you at ease. It's not that bad. I
Right.
just wanted to have a conversation because I really want you to advance in your career, and there's something there that I feel like might get in your way if you're not aware of it, so that way you can change it. What do you think? And now you're having a mutual conversation about it.
Right.
Very different from, all right, let me get straight to the point.
Right.
Here.
Right. Here is sit down, and I'm going to tell you what to do, and
Yes.
you're going to listen. That doesn't always work with everybody. Right?
And it's because we're as managers, they themselves are like stressed out and afraid of what the reaction is going to be. So they're like, they're in survivor mode, and guess what? The other person's thinking, oh my God, this is going to be bad news.
Yeah.
They're in
There you go.
survivor mode,
Right.
and now you're going to have a fruitful conversation.
It's tense to begin with, right? It's
It's never
tense
gonna
and
happen.
fear and worry and.
Yeah.
This taps into something else too that I think is very, very fascinating, and I've done a lot of work with this with people I've interviewed on television over the years, experts in the area as well, and that is dealing with the inner child. And obviously we all have the inner child, and it's good to be childlike and have fun and be youthful and do all the different things, but there are times when unresolved issues from even childhood can rise to the surface.
Yeah.
I mean, how many times have you heard somebody say, stop acting like a child, when the person's 60 and you're saying, stop acting like a child? It's unusual when you hear that, but at the same time, it's usually tied to something. That the inner child can rise to the surface in ways that can be helpful, but also detrimental. Tell us about the inner child and how you work with that.
Yeah. I have to say I am not as deep on the theory of, and even the practice, I would say, because to me that gets very much into a therapeutic space.
Yeah.
So like the therapy where you go really do psychoanalysis, go back.
Unresolved issues.
Unresolved issues. You go back into the past to try and unravel what happened. All of that. In coaching, that's not really what we do so much.
Right.
So to the extent that I do work with this is when it shows up in behavior that is unhelpful to them. And oftentimes it becomes one of those saboteurs. It is one of those patterns of thought patterns of what they've been told in their childhood about themselves.
Yeah.
Or it is something that basically they've developed as a coping mechanism in their childhood. So if somebody had a really messy, chaotic household they were growing up in, you never knew what was coming at you and when it was coming, in what way it was coming at you. You might develop a real controlling habit or behavior. And that was serving you very well growing up.
In that atmosphere.
In that atmosphere, to make some order and predictability, even when there wasn't any, but at least it gave you the container to feel like you could survive, right? To make sense of it somehow. Now, when you're growing up and you're controlling your teenager or the employees working for you to the extent like, it's not done the way I need it, and you know it, and I need it differently, and it needs to be this way and that way, suddenly you're in a very lonely place.
Because people go in the other direction.
Right.
Who's that person? Who
Right.
do they think they are? Don't talk to me that way.
Yeah.
Right.
They're offended by it, and
Yeah.
their saboteurs start acting up,
That
actually.
that style doesn't work with me at all. It does not work with me at all with people when
Yeah.
they're like that.
No. You and probably not too many I
Most-
know.
Yes, it doesn't work. Yeah.
It doesn't.
It doesn't work when people talk to me that way.
Right.
I hear it, but I won't respond in the way that they probably want me to,
Right.
in agreement, and then you'll hear, oh, well, you're not hearing. Oh, I hear. It's just I don't agree.
Yeah.
I hear you. I'm
Right.
just not agreeing with the way you, to me, I'm big with tone.
Yeah.
Tone is huge. Intention is too, but tone. And I think that learning to be able to adjust your delivery, your presentation, and your tone based on the feeling, the vibe of the room, the personalities, is a crucial skill, a crucial thing that, some people have automatically, and some people have to learn. And you work with that as well with all of this, right?
Yeah,
The tone
that's-
is huge.
Those are all the different shades of what I would call the survival brain aspect, right? This is all, or sometimes we refer to it at the company I also work for, sometimes we refer to it as in the box. We're in the box about it, right? We can't really see the forest for the trees in that moment.
Yeah.
And we fall back to these negative patterns
Ways
of coming across to others that we're not even aware of that we're having, but others will tell us.
Yeah.
They'll tell us. I mean, if you have a controller, you get more feedback around that than if you have a pleaser. The pleaser, which is more like my weak side, is this overly wanting to serve people to the point where I get frustrated around it because I'm not doing self-care. I'm not taking care of myself, and I'm over-committing to things that nobody asked me to. But I feel like I should, and it would be the good thing to do, and whatever,
You
and
and
it's
I are
like,
in that same club.
Yeah.
We're in that same club.
Yeah,
And it can get exhausting.
it can get totally
Because
exhausting.
you don't know when to, there's times when, but I've learned through various things, driving along through Death Valley, did it, to be able to, I've had to learn even myself that you have to put the oxygen mask on you first
Yes.
before you help the person next to you. I was always of the ilk, help thy fellow man, and that you do them first. What do you need? How can I help you? And then do you. That is great, and it's a nice way to be, and I'm always still like that. But as time and seasoning and living has come into play, I realize that, I'm here too.
Yes.
I'm in the game. I'm at the party too. And if I don't put the oxygen on me, and I don't tend to, like if I have a fire here and I don't put my fire out before I run with buckets of water for your fire, it's not going to work.
There's nobody going to bring water to the other
They're
fire.
not going to come to my fire. They want me to put mine out and put theirs out. So yes, that's fascinating. How do you deal with that? How do you, as the pleaser, and even when you go into the companies, you want to please them and you want to sort it all out, and nobody's perfect, but you give it your best shot. You're taking a deep breath too. I notice. I'm very observant. She's taking. Here we go. He's tapping into some things that I still work through. Yeah, that's what it is. How do you, as the pleaser, which is also being that pleaser caretaker type, is also part of why you're coaching,
Yes.
part of why it's natural,
Yes.
part of why I'm a host, part of
Yes.
why I'm a communicator storyteller is
Yes.
because I want to lift and inspire and
Yes.
help figure things out for people or help them figure it out.
Yeah.
That's the thing you got to learn is help them figure it out, not always figure it out for them. So how do you deal with that? Obviously you are the people pleaser, you're a caretaker type, which works beautifully for the work that you do, but how do you address that even, for yourself?
I do those tactile exercises and the long session before meetings where I know there is a likelihood that I want to go there.
Yeah.
With clients, when it's about selling something, when it's about somebody else's reputation is at play too, which is one of those. So I would say two things. There might be more, but two things come to mind right away. Number one is I've learned the moments where I tend to most likely go into pleaser mode.
And when is that?
So there are meetings with clients when it's a sale thing, when it's like I want to make the company I'm also representing look good,
Yeah.
or others look good. So now I have a higher tendency to,
Step it up
please
even more, yeah.
not just one party, but two, and really lose myself a little bit in the process there.
Yeah.
And then, so noticing when that is, and then before I have those, I schedule a minimum of 15 minutes where I really do like 12 minutes of those to tactile exercises, so that I'm in fully what I call sage mode. I'm completely in my best part of the brain, right? My medial frontal cortex is involved, and all the other parts where there's the empathy and it's authentic, but there is the courage, there is curiosity, there is the ability, the confidence, the ability to navigate in a conversation, to ask for what is important now, and also to move into action when need to. So when I go into pleaser mode, then it's like, it is even, for others oftentimes, they can feel it's not authentic. And I've had a couple of clients that really taught me that every time I'd go into pleaser mode, it was almost like it triggered them, and they got really frustrated. It was like, I just need a plan. I just need this.
I've heard that too.
Yeah. And I'm like, okay, no problem, blah, 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 blah.
Did you used to react that way in the beginning, or did you take that personally, that they would be responding in the way because you're going out of your way to please them,
right? And
they're responding in that way,
yes.
Right?
So in the beginning, I didn't realize what was going on, and then I realized, well, I'm not going to live with that. And I was like, wait a second, next time I'm getting on the call with that person, I'm going to stand my ground. And I said, I understand how this comes across to you, and what you're looking for is this. Here is what we're doing to get you that. Leave it at that. No more nice extra things.
Right.
And suddenly things were right there. I'm like, oh. Yeah. There was a shift.
That's the approach, right? And that's the other thing too, shifting. People, change is oftentimes a struggle for people, right? When there's change that's happening around them that they have no control over, and we realize in our life that most things as far as change are not things that we are responsible for or that we've caused. We have to react to it, and it's how we embrace it and how we react to it and work through it that is what really counts, more sometimes than the actual change that has happened. But a lot of people do struggle with change that is not change implemented by themselves. Some of that is control. And then there's also the knowing that they have to make some changes, and they're not comfortable with doing that either because it takes them out of that safe, comfortable, familiar zone. Let's talk a little bit about the struggle that people have, and a lot of people will avoid at all costs changing anything. Some of it is fear that they're going to rock the boat and everything's going to disappear if we change something.
Fundamentally, at the bottom of it, you just named it, right? There's fear of the unknown. Because when something changes, we don't really know what the outcome is, what the ripple effect of that might be, what that might mean to us, to others we care about, in the short term or even in the long term. So, having been in change management for a long time, one of the basic rules is find out what they care about and that goes right back to making others feel seen in some way. When you want to influence somebody, and in all aspects of our lives, we have that, whether it's we want to influence our kids to do well in school and to rise to the highest potential that they can, or we want to influence somebody to negotiate a lower price on something. I mean, we have it all the time, certainly in the business world too. If I'm not knowing at all what you care about and I'm trying to influence, how is that going to go? Right. So I have to be willing to let my position go to the side for a bit and to get really curious about, so what does Jim care about? Like, what does he read? What is he into? How does he talk? What words does he use? And what does that maybe indicate? And what can I get curious more about that? And then I can go back and figure out, okay, so based on what I'm hearing here, and based on the agenda that I have of what I need, or what I need of him, or what I want him to agree with or to support, I can now figure out a way to create a common platform from which you might be open to it, at least to have a conversation.
Right, at least.
So this goes back to this whole, it's always the same process, right? It's the same, okay, and now as I'm talking to you, I'm going to really watch how you're reacting to it. Which things that I'm saying, you're going to go like, where is she going with that? Versus, yeah, totally
little triggers, yeah.
Maybe, So I'm going to play that back, and I'm going to listen, I'm going to ask for that. And only then am I going to say the next thing. If I just plow in with my agenda and said, okay, I already know where you're at. I looked at the stuff, and I know you're going to disagree with me, but.
Right. That's not going to, that's all of this now, walls put up, and the other person's getting ready to respond to that approach. And
yeah, exactly.
It's true. That's where I think that leads to building bridges. We always hear about don't burn the bridges, and a lot of people do that, and you've probably seen people do that.
Yeah.
And then they wish that they hadn't, and it's easy to do that, sometimes just in your response or lack of response to something, the words you use and the way that you present yourself, but building bridges. Let's talk a little about that. Is that involving networking? Do you always have to be at every social event and company party? I mean, there's some people that aren't into that as well. Let's talk about building bridges rather than burning them.
It's interesting. I've never thought about the networking aspect of building bridges. So you're giving me some food
Write
for
that down.
thought on that. Like, note taken. Building bridges is probably the first strength that everybody told me I had when I was really little. At the time, I interpreted to some degree as a way of saying, like, that's why you don't have too many friends. Like, as I'm good at building bridges, I'm always good at relating with those over here who really don't like those over there, and somehow I'm always between those.
A unifier.
I'm always in there.
Like that,
And throughout school, when, I wanted to be popular, after all, I am a pleaser, or that is my, over-rotation on my empathy strength, so to speak. It's a very hard place to be then. And I really learned at some point, not that long ago, maybe 2 years ago, one of the coaching classes, I remember getting an exercise. We got homework after a coach training class that said we should write something about how we got to coaching. Okay, I was too tired one night off the day, so I got up early the next morning and I wrote something down. This is before I started Conversations at Play. And I just kind of started writing and it was sort of this story that unfolded in front of me of my whole life about being this bridge builder, but never belonging. That's what I interpret it as. I never fit in. I always wanted to fit in. I went to Israel. I mean, I was fluent in Hebrew. I talked like the people around me, completely behaved like them. And I felt completely normal, but I felt like still there was always something. I wasn't exactly one of them.
Is it because being in the middle, being not extreme on either side, not signing the dotted line with that or with that, always looking for ways to bring that one and that one together, you're not necessarily considered committed to anything in particular because you're not fully with that one or fully with that one. You're in the middle trying to glue the whole thing together.
Yeah.
And that can be, right, it can be an interesting place to be, a beautiful place to be, because the world needs people that do that, the bridge builders.
Yeah.
But yet, because you're doing that, you're not necessarily, again, marching with that and marching with that.
That's right.
And it's an interesting place, because I think there's less people that are the bridge builders, and there's more, I'm with that, and I'm with that, and that's it. I'm exactly that way.
Yeah.
And it can be, some people will even say you're non-committal. I'm like, no, I have but I'm just looking at ways to bring you and bring you. You're over here yelling over here, and you're yelling about this and marching about that, and you're marching about that. I'm probably not going to do either. I'm going to look for ways to get you and all of us at the table, and let's try to work this out.
Yes.
Let's try to figure out ways that we all benefit, because we're not all going to get everything we want.
Exactly.
That can be an interesting place.
Yes, especially if you're trying to belong.
You're trying to, right, and you want to, and you're pivoting and adapting and adjusting you for all of those other scenarios.
Very much so.
Probably why you're very effective at what you do, because you can go into these places, like we're talking about, and see all these different dynamics, and even adjust your approach and adjust the tone of your voice and how you are dealing with the individuals, knowing and assessing the personalities and the responses, and which makes it very effective.
Yeah.
Not that it's not exhausting, but effective.
Sometimes it is. Sometimes you're right, it is. But you know what? It only is exhausting, I think, and I'll have to test this a little bit more.
We will have her back. She'll update us. You'll hear more from Janine in part 2.
In part 2. I think it is exhausting mostly when I'm trying to hold some kind of a position somehow too. When I'm trying to do right by both. When I'm really able to stay in my own authentic power and best self, it isn't. Because then I can let go of the pleaser to both sides. The exhaustion comes when I'm trying to please both of those to some degree.
Right.
I think that's kind of what it is.
Because then you can't be authentic yourself, because you're adapting to them.
That brings me to, I can't bring them together really. And often it's not even to bring them together. It really is, I just shared this with a friend not too long ago, because she was having a hard time with where am I politically. And a lot of people who know me well, they think I'm a Democrat. And I'm like, no, not really.
Right, you just, right.
And actually there are a lot of things about the Republican side that I really admire about the values that the Republicans were funded on in particular. So, but I'm definitely not a Republican either. Well, am I a socialist? Right. No, but I do care about community, right? And I do believe that we have some responsibility that is basic towards everyone, no matter what. That sounds very Democrat and very socialist to me. Sure. But when you really listen to the deeper side of things, then I'm like, well, no, it's not either one. And I gave her the example when I used to live in Israel. I used to work, I had like multiple jobs there. One of which was as an usher during basketball games.
Oh, that's a cool job.
For the VIPs, yeah. I liked it. It was kind of nice. And it was fun too. And I got to make a few extra bucks and see the game. And I used to drive those VIPs crazy because every time a team played well, I didn't care which team it was, I'd be cheering for them. And like, just pick a team, okay? You can't be cheering from like, but that was an awesome shot. That was an amazing play. You gotta admit it, right?
Right.
Like,
Wow.
can't do that. I'm like, that was constantly, and it was one example, but that's been the story of my life in many ways, wherever I went.
Yeah, but see, I look at that, I'm sort of deducing a little bit here.
Yeah.
I'm looking at it like, not just that you're not picking, you know, like if you're in New York, some want the Yankees, some want the Mets, and there's like rivalry and everything else. And I've always been Mets because my father, you know, we were introduced to them first. Though if the Yankees are in it, coming originally from New York, I will root for the home team. Then I become territorial. Then I become the home, the you know, where you're from, supporting that. But what's interesting, like you say, with it is, I think you're seeing, when you're talking about rooting for the team, as you're, you know, helping the VIPs, and excited that this guy just made this fantastic shot, you're looking at the bigger picture. You're looking at the bigger picture. Okay, he's on that team, but I'm not seeing the rivalry. What I'm seeing is skill and talent that individual has. You're sort of lifting them out of even the team atmosphere and looking at the individual and what they're bringing to the table that's helping that particular team, which is a phenomenal way to do it because you apply that to the work you do with the Bridgeford Group. Right. You can come in, you're not going to pick the sides, you're not going to pick the teams, but you can deduce the different scenarios and different dynamics, and the person that is this rock star and is making things happen, and the person that needs a little encouragement and lift up. And that it doesn't always happen in business. There's departments and teams and cubicles, and they're all part of the same umbrella, but oftentimes, you know, they are going against each other, and it's not always cohesive. So I think that's an advantage because I think you are looking at the bigger picture when you are, you know, noticing that person that just did that great shot.
Yeah, I think you're right. And it was something I've only learned like in the last 2 years and was
It's
able
cool when
to
you learn
start
stuff like that, isn't
seeing
it?
this is actually my superpower.
Yeah.
The Brooklyn Bridge had a lot to do with that. It was interesting. I remember as part of the coaching training, I was, you know, kind of caught in a rut of just the routine, responsibility. And when I got to go to New York for the training, I was like, that's 4 days. I can either stay in Manhattan and just kind of do the usual thing,
The touristy stuff.
or I'm gonna do like this as an adventure. No Ubers. I'm gonna use only public transportation. I've never done this in New York before. I'm gonna stay in an Airbnb somewhere different, not in Manhattan, so I really have to take public transportation into the city. And I'm gonna, one touristy goal I had, and I was like, first of all, the clothes was important too. I'm like, I'm not gonna bring any work clothes with me. I'm gonna really, you know, just this is my own,
enjoy it.
Like a trip I'm doing for fun. And I'm gonna wanna walk the Brooklyn Bridge. There's something about that bridge always, maybe it's from the movies I've loved watching.
Oh yeah,
I've always,
a lot of character, a lot of history.
I wanted to go there. And then there's the whole like, you know, very different energies between Manhattan and Brooklyn altogether.
Yes, yes.
And so that, walking that bridge and taking pictures of that bridge, it suddenly became a symbol. And then I shared that with my dad.
Symbol of strength? What was a symbol for you?
There was tradition.
Yeah.
Strength, yes.
Grounding.
Grounding. It didn't look like a bridge. It looked more like a building.
Yeah.
And yet it's a bridge.
Architecturally,
It's got the gates too. There's something there. So I just was fascinated. I didn't really analyze it much yet. And I shared it with my dad, and he's like, you are the bridge. And I'm like, what? And that was the beginning of coming to realize and embrace this feeling of never belonging and fitting in as a negative thing. to actually seeing it, like you just said, this is an advantage.
It's a positive, right? Because you're seeing the bigger
Yes.
picture. You can see,
Yes.
like you said, when you were going over the bridge, you saw the details of the bridge, all the intricacies, the beautiful architecture and everything that,
Yeah.
but you see the larger picture of the span and what the bridge is doing, linking people, going over the river, you know, the convenience of it. You're looking at it in a multitude of ways,
Yeah.
which I think if you're going to be working with people in the capacity that you do, brings to the table interesting perspectives. And then again, talking about being the bridge with a last name like Bridgeford. I mean, how do we
That
not
was just really
even
handy.
tap into that? I mean, that was already set in motion at birth. It's like,
No, this was my.
oh, that's the
it's
married?
It's married.
so set in
Second
motion when
marriage.
you walk down the aisle then.
That's right. That's right. And when I founded the Bridgeford Group, I asked my ex-husband, I said, you know, do you mind me calling my business the Bridgeford Group? Because it really isn't my name. He's like, I think it's fair enough to say that after 14 years of marriage
14
and
years
all the
is-
time we've been, you know, since then friends, is fair enough that you earned the right to with that name, whatever serves you best.
What would you say is probably the most underused or maybe underestimated skill to help people connect with others?
Is articulating what they're noticing about them, make them feel seen.
So it's
Hands
coming back
down.
to seen. Yeah, seen is
Hands
big.
down.
Yeah.
Hands down. And it's something that for some reason is so hard for us. And yet we are so good at it. We're so good at, we have all the senses, and often when we talk about seeing, it means people first, you know, the first question I usually get, especially during COVID times, was like, well, but how do I do this when I have a virtual team? I don't really see them at all. True. But when we see, we don't really mean just with the eyes, because we see with our whole body, with our whole being. We perceive the other being. And that goes back to the soul level, though we don't have to talk about that to people who are maybe not so open to it. But it does, there is I'm perceiving what the presence of this person, this being is. What is their state of mind? And I'm not going that deep in normal conversations. Right. It's as simple as, and my favorite example is one where I became the leader of a person who had a couple of warnings from HR. Like a couple more times, you're gonna, one more time, you're gonna get too close to somebody in an aggressive way and you're out of here. I knew the person, I knew he was brilliant. And HR told me, like, listen, it's already kind of, agreed upon. So in our first one-on-one, I got into the room, small room, big windows, and there's a little round table in the middle of the room, and he's sitting all the way by the window, just like turned away from the room, really. So as I'm coming in on the other side.
So not looking to engage,
right away. You're not even there and you're seeing him, see?
I can see him there. Yeah.
Exactly. And I notice him. Now, I could have just sat down at the table and said, hey, like, ready to start the meeting, and ignore what I've noticed. But what I noticed is the last place he wanted to be was there.
Right.
Now, I could have gone in starting to interpret that, right? Like, you don't want to be here, you hate me already, or be afraid. What's going to happen? Is he come at me out of that corner suddenly, right? Because I've gotten the warnings. And I just shared with him what I noticed. I said, so tell me, why are you still here? And he was like, what? I said, why are you still here? You're obviously miserable. The last place you want to be is here, given where you're sitting, the way you're sitting there. Nobody is tying you to a table or a chair or a pillar here. So what keeps you here? I said, well, nobody ever asked me that question before. Then we started having a conversation. 2 weeks later, he resigned. And he invited me for coffee. And he said, I really have to thank you. I've been miserable for 6 years. I didn't even know until you asked me that question. And we finally decided we're moving to LA. I got a different job. And thank you for asking me that question. And all I did, then I didn't know about this whole seeing part, so, with the term. But I used that's all I did.
Right.
I made him feel seen. And that for him was enough to unlock something that has been built up for
Pandora's box
years.
of incredible things, yeah.
And led to the behavior probably that then HR was like.
He probably thought, and maybe they even built it up, that you were going to come in and you were going to lay down the law and you must do this, do this, do this, do this, and do this, and that's it, and then you're out, as opposed to approaching him on a very human level. There's so much skill set and there's all of these different formatics to what you do, but at the same time, when you approach that, this is the uncanny ability, which I think is really good. You came into a room, you saw a guy sitting totally not interested, unengaged, and probably wants to run out of the room and not bother with this, and assessed it, and then immediately made internal adjustments yourself on the approach. With certain things that you wanted to do through your methodology, but that approach to even get to the point of the methodology, of the point of it all, of the specifics, the approach is what really got him first, and that questioning, which is special because not a lot of people do that. A lot of people go in with, okay, here's the list of the stuff you must do, or you're never going to be the hero. You went in with the approach of understanding this human that was sitting in this chair looking sideways. You saw the person without even really knowing them. You saw the person before the CEO or the vice president or the manager or whatever. And that's an added thing that's a gift. It's a gift that you have, that you're humble about, but it is a gift to be able to do that because a lot of people don't do that. And I know it's a gift because it's what I have, and I've been told it's a gift. You see that person over there who's not social, who's not talking to people at the party. I tend to go to that person, or they end up coming to me because they feel a vibe of comfort and safety, and then they end up they feel comfortable through that situation, and you have that.
Thank you.
That allows you to be able to do this work at levels that probably even surprise you sometimes, right?
That's true.
They're like, my God, not only did I change jobs, I'm more fulfilled, happier. Because a lot of what you do is tied to that too. It isn't just the reason why you're doing what you're doing is so these people can become more productive. People will generally be more productive when they're happier, when they're seen, heard, seen, respected, honored, brought to the table, appreciated. That's a whole other thing in leadership too that's changing, is this empathetic approach, this understanding of the human condition, right? That's pretty exciting, and you're in the thick of that.
Absolutely. It is, and the good news is, while we have a talent to maybe get it even more, and also I think we both have similar strengths, which is the empathy part, which also means then when it gets overplayed is the pleaser. So all of that enables us to be as good at this as we are. It's also a skill that can be learned. And that's the good news for a lot of leaders who may not have that fundamental basis inherently on the empathy level. But this notion of noticing everybody who with any sense of perception would have noticed that guy does not want to be here right now. Most would have ignored that perception that they clearly had, the symptoms there, I can see it, I can sense it.
Right.
But I'm choosing to ignore it because I don't know where it's going. This goes maybe back a little bit to the change you asked earlier about. It's the unknown. Or you choose to just say it and ask a question, as long as it comes from a caring place. the intent is really
Crucial.
important there, right? If it comes from an accusation point,
That's a whole
now you
other-
better watch out.
Then he's going to get out of the chair and tell you a few
Potentially.
things. You generally, obviously, that's your approach, period, is the because you're a very perceptive person, not just coach, but person. And that's a plus because you get that perception and then you go with it as opposed to, okay, there's the perception, but I'm not going to even acknowledge that. I think it's an advantage to be able to have that, and people respond accordingly. Tell us again, before we wrap, some of the other things that you do and you offer. So people watching right now, they say, she's amazing. She's really good at what she does. She cares. She's empathetic. She's strategic as well and has all the formatics and the background, but she's also sees, the human condition in a beautiful way. The different things that you offer and some of the reasons why people do come to you for assistance.
Yeah. So probably the biggest thing that I offer right now is a 8-week program for leaders who are in that category of just overworked, spending too much time at work and not really sure how to maximize, I'm going to say, the potential of their team. But what it comes out as, the relationships don't feel that great. They know that they would like more trust, they don't know how to build it. They feel that their teams aren't really living up to their expectations and they're stuck with some low performers that they can't do nothing about. And now, other than I have to now make up for their job too, so a lot of sometimes, thoughts around like it's all up to me in the end.
Right.
So really an 8-week program around that is based on the positive intelligence approach, but then actually dials it up to enable them to really start having powerful and different conversations with their team members. So build that trust, help them build that skill of making others feel seen, and why is that important and what do you do. So make it very approachable and tactical in a way. So it's not like, oh, it's her magic, but we're gonna
I'll
do
never
this.
get there, right?
That's one. And then another one is really just the basics positive intelligence program. So this is for any individual who either is tired of just being tired
There's a lot of people that will raise their hands on that one.
and knows that there are these constant fear-based reactions or behaviors. Oftentimes, I deal with a lot of women who feel that they shouldn't be where they are, especially when it comes to jobs that are maybe more male-dominated, generally speaking. Or they're in positions and rising quickly, and they're so different from when they look around and who they see, that they just feel like, I don't really have a place there, when in fact they're very much needed exactly where they're at,
they are,
without changing who they are.
Right.
But they don't feel that at all. I would say those are the two most prominent offerings that I have. I do also consult for companies, and part-time for another company that I used to work with still, and then also just now for small and mid-sized businesses with the Bridgeford Group as well.
You enjoy this work, don't you? It's obviously,
Yeah.
it's your passion. Like I
Yeah.
said in the introduction, this is really reflecting the essence of who you are, and it's not work that you just want to do. It's work that you really have to do because it's inside you. And when you get a chance to see some of these positive results of your work, that alone, it must be extraordinary for you.
It is, and if it feels a little bit like the Conversations at Play posts. It's like, I really didn't write this. Like, this really didn't kind of come from me. I didn't really do this. They did it. I was able to be somewhat of a conduit.
Yeah.
Is what I
It's flowing
believe.
through you.
Yes.
Facilitator.
Yes.
Right.
Because, and that goes back to when I feel exhausted, and yes, I feel tired, at the end of a day full of sessions, but also exhilarated.
Yeah. Looking forward to the next.
Yes, and just having seen all the potential, all the strength, all that's there, and knowing that this is the world we live in. It is gorgeous and beautiful. It is powerful too.
It's the positive approach. What do you see as the future? What are some things that you would like to do with the company and that you're excited about going forward?
Well, one of the things I'd really want to play forward is the message that nobody has to try all that hard to be the best version of themselves. They gotta want to. That nobody can take away from them. But if they want to, it's easy in a way. It's easy. We can now, with the approach being no longer, you don't have to go through year-long therapy and go to like the PhD necessarily. It's been distilled down and made accessible for us to say, start with these, stop yourself when you notice it's not good, when you're not feeling good. Stop yourself, stop, don't just push through it.
Right.
Stop, do a tactile exercise which kind of engages the better side of yourself, and then go from there. Maybe ask yourself a question. So a month from now, a year from now, at the end of my life, looking back, what would seem important right now?
Exactly.
Do I still want to get out of the car and punch the guy? What would seem important right now? Or would it feel good to just let it go?
You just keep driving.
Yeah.
Right. True. Well, this was really amazing. This fascinating conversation. And again, you obviously love the work that you do and you're very effective at it. And people come to you again for that sense of solace and reason and understanding, which makes, again, the response and the result for them much more productive, but more fulfilling too. And sometimes they don't even know that we're talking about the soul's purpose, but
That's right.
deep inside.
Yeah.
It's cool stuff. Well, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Jim.
I hope
for
you enjoyed the
having me.
time with us here in the studio.
Very much so, yes.
And we covered a lot of great ground, and I encourage folks again to connect with you, and it's easy to do that. Very approachable, and good luck with everything. It's a pleasure.
Thank you very much. It's been fun getting to know you a little bit better too in the process.
We appreciate you here on Close Up Television. You're doing amazing work.
Thank you.
To learn more about our special guest, Janine Bridgeford, visit this website. For Close Up Television and Radio, I'm Jim Masters. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again next time.